China has banned cryptocurrency, and this is about their 10th ban of it. Literally every 6 months. When I first got involved in the end of 2013, China was banning Bitcoin at that time. Everybody was very worried about it. There was this huge rally, and it was really getting on everyone's radar. And so China, they kicked in and they banned it. And then ever since then, they have every 6 months basically done a fresh ban. So they never really just ban it and say, we're finished. All right. Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast, following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency. This is episode number 29, Cryptocurrency and Innovation in America, featuring the one and only Caroline, Monday, the 27th of September, 2021. I'm your host, Jeremy, and this time we are shaking it up with a bit of a live episode. This is not something we've done before. Where I'm in the same room with the guest instead of doing it kind of remotely. Seems like the pandemic is starting to chill out a bit, so probably in future I'd love to do events at episodes at crypto events and conferences and things like that. So we're going to try it out here. We've got some background music which we can't do anything about, so hopefully everyone enjoys the soundtrack. Anyway, that's enough of that for introduction. Caroline, welcome to the show. You are a cryptocurrency adopter and American, and a long-time listener of my evangelism of Bitcoin.
All the way back to 2017, baby.
Yeah, so give me the rundown. How did you get involved in cryptocurrency, and what's been your experience with the space so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think you were probably one of the first people to mention the concept to me, and at the time I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. I'm a broke college student. I don't really have money to be putting into things that may or may not be kind of risky.
Online gambling.
Yeah. But yeah, I kept hearing more and more about it. Started reading some news articles, kind of some of the financial magazines, newspapers, things like that I follow. Started, talking about it more and more. And eventually, 2021 rolls around. I have a job and a little bit of disposable income. And I'm like, hey, why not give it a shot? See what happens. Cause it seems like that's the way that the world is going, whether we see a full transition in our lifetime or not, it's definitely transitioning that way. So got to get in on the ground floor or as much as close to the ground floor as you can.
Yeah. And you've got some Bitcoin Cash, right? It's the show you wouldn't be allowed on if you were not.
Didn't have Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah. Okay. But do you have any other coins you want to just shield to the audience? What are the best projects that you think they should check out?
I kind of got a little on the Ethereum bandwagon, a little bit on that front, but I was looking into some other cryptos. I have Coinbase, so that made it really easy for me to learn about some other different ones. So I have some Litecoin, some Compound. But yeah, I am a believer in Bitcoin Cash. Okay, so I think, that's definitely my big one.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it. But, I always find it interesting because all kinds of people that I introduce to crypto or whatever, and they get into the scene themselves, and then they find their own coins, things that they like, things that they enjoy, and it's different for everyone. And that's the whole point, is that everybody can, invest in one or as many different coins as they like, and there's something different for everyone. So I always find it interesting to let people explore in the crypto space and then see what they come back with, like, oh, Jeremy, what about this coin, or what about that coin? And I have my own opinions, but if they've read something or found something that shows that that's a great option, then who am I to dispute it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so first up today, we've got some podcast news. So in the last week or so, I released this marketing video for Bitcoin Cash that I called 21, and it was from a few weeks back. I watched the movie 300, which is now 15 years old, but for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's the tale of the Spartans. So it was a historical event that did actually happen, but was then dramatized, obviously, for this movie. And it's about the King Leonidas, who at the time, Xerxes, who was the Persian emperor, had this huge army, and he was starting to kind of conquer all of Europe and all of the world in his mind. But in order to stop his advance, the Spartans, who are these most elite, Greek soldiers that have been trained, in combat and in a culture of fighting and violence since they were very young, they set up to fight him. He had this huge army of a million people, or hundreds of thousands, which at the time was an earth-shaking amount relative to the global population. And the Spartans only had 300 soldiers, and they fought at a pass, a little cliff pass, so that their 300 elite squad could stand up against the much larger Persian army, because they didn't have they couldn't overwhelm them with numbers by flanking around the sides. So the story is kind of about this epic battle, and it's sort of the way it ended was that all the 300 die, they all get wiped out, but they delay long enough for the rest of Greece to sort of rally together and push back, which is what happened actually in history. So I watched that movie recently. I highly recommend it. Everybody check out that movie. But in watching it, it sort of struck me as a bit of a parallel to the Bitcoin Cash community, who are the ultimate sort of minority that in the early days of Bitcoin was like the 300, with just a small amount of people sort of trying to change the world against, the banks and everybody else being invested in their national currencies. But then ultimately Bitcoin Cash had split off from Bitcoin itself. And so even then it's sort of been sold out and had to fight against the brand name, and just this very uphill battle of just a complete hardcore that will not budge no matter what. And that's something I quite like about it. So I made this video, which was sort of comparing that. And I got a shout out to BCH on Twitter, who helped me out with some of the visual edits. So I kind of did the initial script, and then he came in and added some of the video effects. And the Spartans have red cloaks, so we changed that to green, and added the Bitcoin Cash logos on their shields and some dramatic subtitles and everything to make it a bit cinematic. So yeah, anyway, I made that, and I thought it was pretty cool. It has some hype, kind of metal rock music, which is from the movie as well. And then released that to the community, and I think it was pretty well received. But it is targeting a very specific niche. And so I've got Caroline here, because Caroline is a digital marketing and media expert, full-time job in that industry. So just 20 minutes ago, half an hour ago, I showed her the clip, and we're now going to get a very harsh and candid review of what did you think? Was this a good video? Is this how cryptocurrency should be marketed?
I mean, I did like the metaphor itself, and kind of that sort of comparison that you made to, the Spartans in the movie 300. That was an interesting take on it. I will say, I guess I had some legal questions just with copyrights and stuff. That was probably the big one for me, was, if this is a massive thing, you're going to have to cover some of your bases with the copyrights, and making sure you're citing the right people, and potentially giving royalties to the people who worked on the movie 300.
Yeah.
A way around that, or maybe not fully around it, but kind of around it, is to kind of do your own version, if you could find enough people to kind of reenact a similar scene, but with your own stuff. But that was probably my biggest question about it. Was I have a feeling there were some issues on that front, but aside from the comparison itself and the metaphor itself, I thought was really interesting, and you could certainly use a similar theme for marketing Bitcoin Cash to kind of get the idea out there, I think.
Yeah, because I mean, as regards to the legal sort of side of it, I mean, there are provisions and stuff around being able to fair use, existing media, and you're allowed to sort of chop and change things. And obviously people do that on YouTube all the time. Plus we did some of our own, visual editing and everything. So my hope is that would make us
make
enough
it different
different
enough.
Yeah, that it would just kind of be like, okay, well, that's creative license. That's sort of a remix. But on the other hand, I am totally happy to be sued over this if it meant that the video got big enough that it got someone's attention. That's kind of the catch-22 of all these things. It would be sort of a Streisand effect type of moment. If the producers of 300 want to sue me over my little YouTube edit, then that other places would start to pick up that story, and it would be a huge thing. It would be a massive marketing hit for the Bitcoin Cash community, as everybody wanted to watch this controversial video. So it might be the best thing in the world if they end up trying to sue us over that. I don't know exactly, but I think really the key point is just that community vibe, and that strength of just a minority can defeat a much larger majority if they just will not budge, like, no matter what. That's kind of really the message that I was trying to get out, and make it a bit dramatic and everything. And I mean, we've seen that with the original Bitcoin, right? That no matter how many times it was called a scam, or people attacked it, or hated on it, or ignored it, or laughed at it, or joked at it, the actual Bitcoiners themselves were just like, nope, this is it. We're not moving off it. And eventually the rest of the world has to budge, right? It's kind of similar to this principle by Nassim Taleb about intolerant minorities, that if, let's say you have a group of people, if there's 5, omnivores and 1 vegetarian, well, they will go to a vegetarian restaurant to accommodate that one person, because everybody else can kind of be flexible, but that one person just will not budge and will be excluded. So in order, things will obviously shift to the person who has the strongest opinion that will not budge off it, even if they're outnumbered. Or the same way that if you have 8 people in a group and one of them speaks English and the other 7 speak, let's say, French, but they also speak a little bit of English, but the one English person doesn't speak French, then usually people will talk in English so that everyone can be included, and because they don't have that flexibility to participate on both sides, naturally it will move to that way. And that's basically the same principle of Bitcoin, and eventually it's going to be the same principle of Bitcoin Cash, which is that people come in from other cryptos slowly to Bitcoin Cash, but it's because it's so hardcore and so serious with the plan to kind of take over the whole world, people generally don't tend to leave as much from Bitcoin Cash to other communities. So in the long run, I think that's where it's gonna find a lot of success, hopefully. Anyway, and just one of the funniest things about this was on the next slide was, coincidentally, then we had some Bitcoin BTC people had the same idea, basically, where this one guy, Laser Hodl, he said on Twitter, if we had to die for Bitcoin to succeed, it would be worth it. And then this one other guy who followed him was Satrinity. He said, we're the 300 Spartans. So this was a couple of days after I'd released my video. And I don't think they knew about that, but it was funny that they that got those same vibes of, yeah, it's us just fighting up against the, outnumbered by the bankers and everything like that. And this was a classic moment, because then we were able to, Bcash and I were posting our video in the comments. And the best part about it was that these guys who were saying we'd die for Bitcoin and everything, they then just immediately blocked us on Twitter because they didn't like our video, sort of got under their skin, right? So it was a bit of a encapsulation of the whole thing, where Bitcoiners like to believe that they are the true original hardcore minority. But the fact of the matter is, since their whole premise now is just our price is higher, and that's really it, they've kind of lost the original vision of actually trading peer-to-peer with people. So if you call them out on that, they're really fragile and they just immediately block you. But in their head, they're these ultra tough warriors that are going to go the distance, but they can't even stand one comment on Twitter, and they're already salty. So it's pretty obvious to me that that's a coin that is not going to be able to hang in the long run when their own supporters are that kind of easily perturbed just on Twitter. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Well, I was actually kind of even thinking about it like from a digital marketing perspective of, you know, part of what digital marketing is all about, especially social media marketing, is sort of building the conversation or encouraging the conversation. So it's not really productive when, you know, somebody gets really touchy about some of these subjects, but you know, being able to have that conversation with people who have, you know, two different opinions about two different kinds of cryptocurrency, there's value in that. I kind of wish that they would have been a little bit hardened up a little bit on it so that you could kind of have that conversation back and forth with each other. But I thought it was cool that you were kind of able to throw that video in there and kind of give them another way of thinking about things. So
yeah, exactly, because they're thinking, oh, we're so hardcore and we're so cool with our Twitter post, but it's like, yeah, but we went the extra mile.
We made the video.
We made a whole video, and like it's a whole thing and everything like that, right? So it's really just a question of, you know, action defeats words. You know, people can talk a big game, but where's their video with the 300 Spartans? Oh wait, they didn't make it. And if they do make it now, which they're not going to, it would just be a ripoff. And they're like, you know, they're behind the curve. They're copying. You don't want to be somebody else setting this tone, right? That's the digital, like, that's the marketing thing, is you've got to be, yeah, you've got to be the fresh one, not the copycat, and the knockoff is always seen as worse. And that was why I had in the original video, the original cryptocurrency, you know, that's a very strong point in Bitcoin Cash, that they're just like, read the white paper, it's us, we are the original. And Bitcoiners, they've actually sort of given that away. They've sort of seceded that, because they say, oh, now it's like digital gold. And it's like, well, you can read in the white paper, it's not about digital gold. There's some references to that, but that was the point, was to just trade it directly, not to be storing it in a bank vault, you know. So it really just, that's a message that we got to stick to. And as time goes on, it's going to be more and more obvious that the BTC crowd are just finished and out of it. Cool, right? So that was the big initial segment today, but we got to double back to our usual statistics that we check in on every week. So the price this week, $506 and 72 cents US for one Bitcoin Cash. So down quite a bit this week, and 86.3 BCH to one BTC. So also down against BTC, but there has been a lot of instability in the cryptocurrency markets this week as a result of a number of things, including some of the topics we're going to talk about. China banning it, the Evergrande stuff in China. They've had a lot of problems with their real estate market. Everybody just generally quite uncertain. And in the cryptocurrency markets in those times, it will tend to be that people sell off all the other coins and move back into Bitcoin, because they see it as the most strongest and most reliable. So I think that's been part of it. But as a cryptocurrency investor, Caroline, what do you think about the price? Obviously, it is horribly volatile. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. But how have you handled that?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, the biggest piece of advice I could give anybody is, like, don't be investing money that you don't have, or, you know, make sure you have disposable income to put into this, because you can make money as quickly as you can lose it. You know, for me, I sort of, when I started investing, it was, I knew that I was going to hold on to my crypto for a while. I have not quite gotten on the bandwagon of using it for transactions and things like that, because it is so volatile. I like, you know, with my bank account, I know that $1 is $1, and it's just always going to be $1. And yeah, I'm not going to make a whole lot of money off of that, aside from, you know, a tiny little bit of interest maybe. But I always know that I have that money. You can't necessarily know that with a lot of crypto. But yeah, if you make sure that you always are only putting in money that you can afford to lose. If you can afford to lose it all, then it's okay to be putting that money in, but it's going to go all over the place. I remember earlier this year, didn't it go above like 1,500 USD? Yeah. I mean, you know, it skyrocketed and then plummeted again. So it's going to do that. It's kind of a typical thing to happen.
Yeah, it is pretty inevitable. And that is ultimately, how people should treat it, you know, because I mean, there's, you know, as the world sort of shifts over, it's just going to be a very volatile process. So, I mean, I believe that it's going to just take over absolutely everything, but maybe it just gets to a certain size, it hits a certain niche, and then that's what it's used for. And then, you know, government currency is used for something else like that. I don't really believe in that, but I can see, you know, there's a strong case. Well, I don't think there is, but anyway, the point is, some people might think that was a potential outcome, right? And so under that scenario, it makes sense that you would sort of migrate over as your risk tolerance allows, and the same, you know, even for people who are sort of true believers and whatever, it's still like it is very volatile and life's difficult. You know, people have all kinds of expenses and things they need, and yeah, if you just go all in on crypto and then it goes through the floor, well, you might be struggling a little. So yeah, make sure you're not wrecking yourself.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
As Ice Caroline says, you know, famous rapper.
Yeah.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Okay, cool. So we got the transactions as well this week that we follow. This week, kind of notable for the fact that BCH had this huge surge in activity, where it has been, you know, following about a half to a third of BTC, but then just for couple days, really, it just spiked up and yet again did more transactions than BTC. So this has happened before and it's happened again, and the fees don't go up whenever this happens. So the model is proven that the larger blocks from Bitcoin Cash can make it a more efficient payment network for more transactions. We just really need to build up enough of an economy for it to actually be sustained like that. So, you know, that's the hope for the future. But you know, it has been mostly pretty flat over the last 6 months in terms of the actual on-chain transactions. I don't know. What do you think about this? Have you?
I don't have a whole lot of opinions on that.
Have you been transacting a lot?
No, because I started investing as it was going up, and now it's plummeted again. I'm holding on to my Bitcoin Cash until it goes back up again.
Yeah, you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I'm a long hauler.
All right, so now we got the BTC cent in USD and the BCH. So like we talked about last week, there was just this huge spike as people were saying maybe somebody's been hacked and all these billions of dollars were being moved around. Well, a couple of weeks later, it seems it hasn't resulted in calamity. Like, there hasn't come out news that FTX have lost billions in Bitcoin and the whole thing's going to blow up and they're going to be in crisis. Like, so it seems, at least for the moment, that things have kind of settled down to a more regular type of level in terms of the actual BTC volume, and the same with the BCH. It did have a big spike on that same day as the transaction. So yet again, for the second or third time, BCH has just for a moment peaked above the metrics of BTC. So the signs are there that it could just, you know, get over and then stay over, but it's still just sort of testing the waters in terms of making it there. But I don't know, perhaps this goes somewhat to explaining the volatility. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Any thoughts on this one?
No.
Okay. Well,
you're more experienced in this area than I am.
Yeah. No, this is definitely on-chain analytics is not, mainstream thing. Right. Okay. So we've got first news of the week then was this. So there's Noise.cash. I don't know if I showed you Noise.cash.
You haven't.
I will show you Noise.cash.
Okay.
So it's basically like Twitter, except when you can like and comment on people's posts, it sends them Bitcoin Cash, right? So you can send money to anybody just because their comment was pretty cool, which is an interesting idea because it, you know, we already sort of live in a world where being famous or having a lot of attention, a lot of Twitter followers, usually people can monetize that some way, right? Like they can, they can do a media deal, or they, you know, maybe they're famous because they're an artist or something like that. And the bigger reach of their Twitter following means whatever they post, you know, they can find a way to turn that into money for themselves. But Noise.cash has taken that a step further, where in theory, if you had, I don't think even the biggest poster on Noise.cash, you know, the biggest is Mark Demisel, besides the official account. And he has like, I think 7,000 or something like that. But in the future, as it grows, if you could have, you know, 100,000 followers on this platform, I mean, if each of them, you know, sent you 10 cents, right, it adds up fast, especially when you can just make new posts all the time. Or if, you know, I don't know what the average send is. Probably the default is just like 1 cent or 2 cents, but you can, and I have seen people have sent, you know, $500 or $1,000 if somebody posts, you know, like a breaking news story, for instance, if they're being a journalist on the front line of something like in the crypto scene or otherwise, right? Like we might see more and more journalists and fringe media who can't get sort of corporate backing. They could post on here and then be directly supported by their community for the work they're doing, right? So anyway, there's been a huge hit in the Bitcoin Cash scene over the last 7 or 8 months. It's grown a lot. It started out very, very small and was all focused on Bitcoin Cash, but now there's all kinds of content on there because people have started, you know, diversifying into their other interests, right? And so the story from this week was that they've grown so much that they're now starting to be the target of attacks, because that's what happens when your website is small. Nobody knows about it, nobody attacks it, right? But as it gets bigger and bigger, more people start to attack it. So somebody was trying to attack Noise.cash with these trying millions of password combinations, and I guess in this case it's more of an issue than even like Twitter, because even if they got in, they could maybe try and take people's money as well as just you know their data or their information or their private messages, right? So I think this is just, it sort of ties into the whole thing of this theme of the Spartans is that like as you get bigger, as you get more attention, well, the opposition ramps up too, you know, and Bitcoin Cash has suffered in the past because it has struggled with censorship, that whenever it starts to get rolling, you know, the sort of the powers that be, I don't even really want to use that phrase, but people who are against it, whether that's because they've invested in Bitcoin BTC, or whether because they don't want to see cryptocurrency succeeding, or just because they see the opportunity to make money, like stealing all this Bitcoin Cash, they start trying to find ways to, you know, hack and attack it. And the community has to be prepared for that and also respond by, you know, building its own channels and its own resilient network to survive these kind of attacks. So just, yeah, what are your thoughts on both the idea of like a monetized Twitter, and then also I don't know if you have any opinions on government or other kind of attacks on these sort of crypto projects, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and as you were explaining this, I think you did wind up showing me Noise.cash. My first initial instinct was, well, why would you want to monetize social media when you have all these mainstream social medias that you can use like for free? I do think that there's probably some value though, like you said, with people being able to send, you know, a penny or, you know, 2 cents, something like that, where it's sort of not really going to hurt most people. It's not going to be, you know, taking large sums of cash, but if you had enough followers, you could sort of develop a huge amount of money just by a couple of people sending you 2 cents with a post. Part of the problem though, and we're seeing this with them having a hack attempt, is anytime you're dealing with money of any kind, you really need to have like heightened security. You know, there's loads of measures that banks, other financial institutions are going to take with their online platforms and apps and things like that. And they still get hacked. So then, you know, if you're looking at like Noise.cash, I'm sure those are not in place. And so it makes it a lot easier for people to, you know, hack in and try and take advantage of people. So you have to have some semblance of security measures set up if anytime you're dealing with something involving money of any kind or any kind of currency. So I guess, yeah, that I'm not surprised to hear that this has happened, especially since it's becoming bigger. I just, you know, it's a step that needs to be taken anytime you're dealing with this type of thing.
Yeah. And it is inevitable, right? It is, people are going to try and get in there. And this one, it was like attempted, but the actual amount of compromises was quite small. So
which is good.
That was one good thing for the Bitcoin Cash community, that it seems like those measures had been taken to a reasonably, obviously not, it wasn't totally bulletproof, but I'm sure, you know, and that's a big theme of cryptocurrency. Like as it gets attacked, instead of getting weaker, it gets stronger, right? It's anti-fragile, right? Like as more people criticize it or find problems with it, well, the community thinks and they come up with solutions because they say, yeah, that's true, or they need to be resilient against every kind of attack. That was sort of the birth of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in general is that there's all kinds of people gunning for it, because people always want to steal money and the government wants to shut it down. And the banks obviously want to do whatever they can to disrupt it if it's disrupting their business. So it has to prove its own mettle in that it has to survive all of these different incoming attacks at every scale. And ultimately, the idea is that people who don't like it will run out of attacks that they can make, that they've tried everything and it hasn't stopped it. It's still running, right? Like the Bitcoin network since inception and the Bitcoin Cash network, the same, have both had 100% uptime. It has basically never been taken. There's been one or two small chain fixes, but I don't think you've ever not been able to sort of submit transactions. And the longer that carries on and the more provably secure it is, obviously the better for the currency and the community, and the more faith that the world generally has that that crypto is solid and not going away, right? So so that is really important. All right, next up we've got, this is a bit of a recurring cycle. I think I've even already had this headline pretty much on the show in the last 6 months, but China has banned cryptocurrency, and this is about their 10th ban of it. Literally every 6 months. When I first got involved in the end of 2013, China was banning Bitcoin at that time. Everybody was very worried about it. There was this huge rally and it was really getting on everyone's radar. And so China, they kicked in and they banned it. And then ever since then, they have every 6 months basically done a fresh ban. So they never really just ban it and say, we're finished. Instead, they ban it. But who knows how much that's actually enforced, or whether many punishments are handed out, or whether it's more sort of grandstanding, or whether they were trying to sort of scare off other countries from getting involved in it. There could be a lot of things, but this latest one it's the same in that I'm completely unworried that in 6 months' time they'll announce that they banned it again, and in the intervening period of time everyone will have learned to ignore them. But the interesting thing about this one that has not been seen before is that they specifically mentioned certain cryptocurrencies. This was not just, we don't like cryptocurrencies, which has been seen in the past. It was Bitcoin, BTC, Ethereum, and Tether, which, as I've discussed on the show before, is a bit of a scam and is going to blow up and be a real problem. So China maybe is actually doing its citizens a favor in that sense if they are saving them from that scam, but they're also probably not doing them a favor if they're cutting off their ability to use Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? So is this going to finish off cryptocurrency or be a big problem for the industry? No, because it will just route around it and carry on in the rest of the world where it's not banned, basically. And China didn't ban owning it either. So everyone who has it now didn't have to sell out. They could just keep sitting on it. And I guess also in China, it's quite common that people might just, whatever the rules are and whatever's actually going on can be quite different depending on how well connected you are as well too. So for all of those reasons, I'm not super stressed about this. And it was just another round of China bans Bitcoin. But it's certainly interesting that they're calling out different currencies. But yeah, what do you think about cryptocurrency getting regulated and different countries, responding in this way with the law?
Yeah, I think one of the things you have to keep in mind with China, and you see this with the ongoing, bans, they ban it and then nothing really happens, is they are to a certain extent trying to just flex their muscles, kind of cause a little bit of chaos, prove that they've got, a stand in global economics. And this is just one example of that. You can see that in, many other areas of the economy. But I do think we're going to see more of this regulation, though. I know, and I can't remember, I haven't heard anything about this in a while, but the U.S. Congress had like a special team that they created to kind of look into crypto and, are we taxing it correctly? What kind of regulations do we need to put in place to protect consumers? The bigger that it becomes, it's going to skew this way. It'll just be interesting to see how different countries sort of handle it. It's kind of rare in the US for us to really be pushing regulations or things like that. But I do think we'll continue to see it as it continues to grow, especially because right now I think it's taxed like property. This is technically a currency, but we tax it like property. So I think there's going to be more more looking into that. Like, is that the correct way for us to be regulating this, or is there another way? So we're going to continue to see this across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I mean, very interesting. I talked about last week that the regulators always are trying to, they're trying to sort of play both sides of the fence, right? Mm-hmm. If it suits them for it to be a property, then it'll be a property. But as soon as it suits them to be a currency, it'll be a currency. And then as it suits them to be a stock or a commodity, that's what it'll be, right? And every different government agency who are not necessarily coordinated across the board might be trying to put in their own rules and regulations and whatever. And the fact of the matter is that cryptocurrency companies, they can't afford to try and follow every single different type of rule, especially when they're A, not clear, and B, get changed all the time, because they're trying to run a business. You know, they've got enough other priorities to worry about between engineering new products and, you know, handling customer support and marketing. You know, they've got enough things. So to some extent, obviously, consumers can be reassured or protected in some sense by having regulation. But if those regulations are not well understood and rarely enforced, then the benefit is kind of limited, and companies and consumers might just totally ignore them. But even if they do that, well, then you're left on the other side, which is that it's just people are out to sort of look after themselves. And if there is any disaster, well, it's just too bad, so sad, you know. And that's kind of the way that I personally like cryptocurrency, that you just do your own research, and if you get scammed or lose coins or whatever, which I have done myself, right? So I have skin in the game. I'm not just saying this has happened to me. Then you know, you just sort of accept your own responsibility that I was an idiot and I should have, you know, done my research better. I shouldn't have put the coins in somebody else's control, you know, all those kind of things. But it's not necessarily realistic that everybody would agree with or even, you know, operate that way, right? So there is going to be a spectrum of different approaches, and certainly China have had one of the globally the most interesting approaches, which seems to be very low enforcement but constant scary announcements that it's all over and they're not allowing it anymore, right? We haven't seen really in, you know, the UK or in Australia or in America even any sense that it should be illegal. I don't think, like, there's a sense that it should be regulated, but I don't think the idea of just, no, we're not having this at all can really fly in an economy or an environment where people are expecting, like, we want to be on the forefront of innovation. We don't want to be left behind. We want to let the free market and capitalism sort of develop it, right? At least that's my sense. I don't know. Has there been any of that? Do you think there are many people in America that would say it should be illegal, completely get rid of it all?
I mean, there's definitely talk of that. I don't know that it's really to any sort of extent that anybody's too concerned about it. But I have heard about, you know, certain politicians coming out and saying, yeah, like, we shouldn't have any of this going on. We need to ban crypto. I don't think it will gain a whole lot of traction, at least in the US. We're too much of a free market for that to really take place. I think the more likely trajectory is just that it's going to become more and more regulated. It's going to be taxed differently. It's going to, you know, a lot of that stuff. But it's certainly that sentiment is certainly there in the political landscape. Like, there are people who feel that way. So, but
at this point, what? It's just too big. It's gone too far. Do you think if, let's say, 5 years ago, mm-hmm. and this is kind of the ironic thing about it, right, is the people who most want to ban it were the least aware of it, right? So when they could have had maybe some more clout or some more chance to sway people onto their side, they either ignored it or they didn't pay attention to it. And now that it's big and it's actually too hard for them to, you know, it's in too deep, mm-hmm. it's too entrenched in everything, or it's got too much momentum, now they want to ban it, but they've kind of missed their window to do it. But do you think there would have been more public sympathy if there'd been big calls to ban it 5 years ago, let's say?
Potentially, just because a lot fewer people were involved. I do think, at least in the US, there is sort of that feeling that we are a free market and you can't just outright ban something unless it's, you know, particularly dangerous to somebody. And I don't think anybody sees crypto as being dangerous in any way.
Well, it is dangerous in the sense you can lose all your money.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously. And again, I think that's more of a regulatory issue than anything else. It's not like it's not like heavy
Like
drugs or anything.
guns,
Where it could, potentially kill somebody directly.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably where we see that it isn't going to have as much of a traction in a country like the US, but you do see a place like China that does have a real stranglehold over its own economy. Where that kind of messaging can play a big role. And people can hear that and be like, oh, they may actually act on that. Whereas in the US, it's more of, it's just some politician that's trying to, get their name out there talking about this stuff.
A bit more sort of grandstanding. And that's definitely interesting that different countries will have their thing to ban it, but like in the US, hard drugs, I mean, there's always still just a bit of a gap between talking the talk and walking the walk, right? The Americans have had the war on drugs for a long time, and sure, drugs are not a pervasive problem in the majority of American society, right? But they're around. If you want to get hard drugs, if you're keen for it, you probably can, right? Probably anywhere in America. So even if drugs can make it around America, then I'm pretty sure that crypto can. And my logic for that is pretty simple, which is that maybe 5% of people really want drugs, but a lot more than 5% of people really want crypto. So in that sense, it's got a much big, and also drug users perhaps not the most able to coordinate or build economic value, but crypto people are maybe a bit more clear-headed and got their lives together. I don't know, maybe. So that's another thing to sort of think about for anybody who thinks that America or even China is going to be able to completely eliminate it. There's drugs in China for sure too. It's just a question of ratcheting up the risk really as it was. So kind of on the same topic then, Coinbase last week we talked about the SEC who they Coinbase said, look, we're going to release a Bitcoin lending program, which a lot of other companies had done. So it was like deposit your Bitcoin with us, and then in a year, we give it back plus 2% extra, that kind of a thing. And a lot of companies had done similar products to that. And so the SEC had told Coinbase, look, if you're going to do something like this, you should tell us and give us a heads up. And so, we can be involved. And so Coinbase, who are a very regulatory compliant company, agreed with them. And before they launched their new product, they told the SEC about it. And the SEC came back and said, this is illegal. You can't do this. If you do this, we're going to sue you. And Coinbase said, why? A, when everyone else already has this and you're not suing them. And like B, why us? Can you give us some more reasons and detailed reasoning? And the SEC basically didn't really refuse to provide any info. So there was a huge public outcry because Coinbase published all this information and said, look, here's the SEC completely killing innovation and whatever, like, why are you doing this to us? And what they ended up happening was that Coinbase backed off and they didn't release their product, which I guess is a big loss for them because they would have spent the time and energy to build it and develop it and figure out how to fit it into the legal framework, which then got changed out from underneath them, right? So that's a huge loss. And also it's obviously a competitive disadvantage that if their competitors have these products and are just running them and consumers want them, right, because they're going to those platforms for those reasons, then Coinbase can't be able to keep up with this if they can't offer the lending products themselves. So obviously the SEC did bully them off this position one way or another, and maybe I don't know how much bad blood it will have created between those two, but is this a case of innovation being stifled by the regulators, or how much faith do you think the average American has in the sort of good intentions of someone like the SEC to regulate in the interest of consumers versus just protecting the entrenched banks and, the government interests and the lobby groups and whatever?
Yeah, I think it's tough because the SEC does have a good track record of looking out for consumers. So for them to come out and do something like this, for someone who's not super educated in things like cryptocurrency and some of the finer points, especially with being able to lend crypto out and make some interest off of that. I think it's easy for people to sort of side with the SEC on that because they have a good track record. They clearly aren't free of fault And I would be really interested for them to actually come out and say why. Like, why really are you telling Coinbase that they can't do this? Do you think, is it something to do with them being significantly bigger than any of these other institutions that are they're allowing to do this sort of thing? But I want to know what the SEC's side of the story is, and I wish they would come out and say it, because I think that would give a lot more clarity to people of, you know, why they made this decision and what can Coinbase do so that they can be involved in this. But
yeah, so even you know, one of the things when I think of America, and I imagine it as a country, especially obviously relative to Australia, but even to you know, parts of Europe or the UK or whatever, is the sort of distrust of government, right? That people are very, very strongly, you know, right from the founding of the country, it was overtax regulation, right? That was what the whole War of Independence and everything was about. So I imagine Americans as quite a bit more willing to sort of disregard the government, or to not believe that the government is there to look after them and you know, working in their best interests. And so as a result of that, I think we've seen that cryptocurrency has had a fairly, you know, America is definitely a big player in the cryptocurrency space, because of that, you know, tradition of entrepreneurialism and Silicon Valley and all of that sort of stuff. But these kind of regulations have kind of put the brakes on that a bit, which is that I think a lot of companies now that are involved in America might be looking for ways to get out of there, and new ones that would be starting in the industry. When they look around the world, I mean, they can probably set up anywhere, because it is an internet-based thing. If you've got a good internet connection, well, you're probably right to serve consumers globally. So for those reasons, I can see that America is maybe cutting off their nose to spite their face a little bit. That they really, in the long run, the more confusing, the more the SEC kind of gives everyone the runaround, and the more they get their existing industry offside, it just hurts the growth of it overall. And you know, cryptocurrency is going to find a way in some country somewhere, and it might just not end up being America in large part. Are you worried about that, or do you think that people in America, you know, like we talked before about, people might want to ban it, right? But there must be a middle ground there. There's some people who want to ban it, and some people who love it and think we should have as much of it as possible. For the people in the middle, how strongly do they think of the idea that if we ban it, even if, you know, I might not like it, but if we ban it, we're also cutting ourselves off from that free innovation?
yeah, I don't know that it's something that the average person has given too much thought to, but I think that it's pretty clear to see that if you do sort of regulate it into the ground, that it's going to put the US at a disadvantage. One of the things that Americans love to talk about is America being the greatest country in the world. Well, if you want to be the greatest, you need to participate in the world. You need to participate in the global economy. And if this is how the global economy is moving, we need to be involved in it. I would imagine that as it continues to become more mainstream, I'd say it's probably only over the past year to 2 years that it's sort of come into the general consciousness of Americans a little bit more. I do think that people will start to have more opinions on, you know, the value of it in our economy, but we're just not quite there yet. It's not something that the average person has been aware of for too long at this stage, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear you say, you know, because I put it on your radar, you know, years ago, and so I guess maybe it's in the back of your mind, but obviously for most people, they hear about it once, or they forget about it, or they don't really know what it's like. Can you talk a little about, like, among, you know, your friends or your relatives or anything, have they reached out to you, or have they talked to you about it, or would you see, I don't know, more advertise? For instance, in the last, I had a segments on this show where I talked about starting to see more posters pop up around London with you know, Bitcoin and information, you know, check out this service, that service, right? It started to just come up, and that kind of background passive presence does sort of slowly build up in people's mind. Like, on the ground, in America. Have you seen any of that? What's that been like?
Yeah, I mean, Coinbase is a good example. They, right before they came out with their IPO, they started running commercials on TV, basically like tracking the timeline of Bitcoin and how much it was worth in US dollars, and kind of ending with it, skyrocketing into like $50,000, and was like, oh, it's just the beginning, and everybody come get involved in Coinbase. But we have seen a little bit of that, I think maybe to a lesser extent than you're seeing in London, as far as seeing it like on street corners and things like that. I also don't live in a major city, so it's possible that in someplace like New York you would see a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
But it definitely is something that we're seeing a little bit more of. But again, I mean, the commercials Coinbase was running was like January of this year. And before that, I hadn't seen anything on a TV about like Bitcoin or crypto or anything. So it's definitely been a slow process for sure.
Yeah, but if breaking through now, I mean, that is very interesting to hear. And kind of an interesting angle by Coinbase to lean into the whole get rich angle, that may or may not have worked out in terms of people that invested and then subsequently lost a lot of money, right? So that's certainly a risky maneuver.
I do think, though, that it's kind of following that same trajectory, kind of as I was explaining to you. Like, I'm not super involved in like day-to-day transactions with the crypto that I have. I definitely have more of a stock mindset about it. And I know, the few friends that I have that have invested in crypto, it's a little bit more of that mindset. They aren't going around looking for places that will accept Bitcoin Cash or accept Ethereum. They're just looking to, buy some and hold it, and see if they can make some money off of it in the long term, kind of like diversifying their investment portfolio. So I think we still have a long ways to go before it becomes truly mainstream to be using crypto to buy stuff, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an interesting angle on it, right? Is that the younger people, maybe, you would think traditionally that they would have a more open mindset to a new technology or whatever. But I think probably in this case, what a lot of people are missing who, if you're 40 or 50 right now and you're getting into cryptocurrency, you might have different reasons for that. But probably like retirement planning is not something that you're thinking about. But if you're in, your 20s or you're a teenager, and you might think, look, I can get some crypto now and just let the industry run for 30 years. And maybe in 30 or 40 years, it will be a completely different, story, what's going on. And so I don't want to be completely missing out on that, right? And so it doesn't even need to be, even though the premise eventually is that everybody will be trading cryptocurrency, you can kind of get there by stealth, which is if everybody who is younger starts thinking, I need to at least have some. And definitely, I've seen people that I have introduced to cryptocurrency, even if they don't get to the point of wanting to trade it every day, or it's not convenient or whatever, but they still understand that it's valuable and they want to hold on to it. And that's the most significant thing, right? Because if you end up with a society where everybody wants to hold crypto, then it will be traded naturally because everybody wants crypto and everybody wants, food and drink and to pay their rent and all that sort of stuff, right? And so if more and more and more people are getting on board the idea that crypto is here to stay, then naturally an economy will start to kind of grow out of that, even without needing to force the aspect of like, can I pay you back with this, or is this shop accepting it, or whatever, right? So
for sure.
All right, cool. So let's have a look here at we've got the big news as well for this week was AMC, who are the world's largest cinema chain with 1,004 theaters worldwide and 11,041. Kind of interesting there that it's all 1s, 0s, and 4s screens. Started accepting Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, and Litecoin. So they announced a little while ago, I think, that they were going to accept Bitcoin BTC. And I don't know that there was any great announcement or evidence as part of this that had been a roaring success and they'd been thrilled by it. And so it sort of raises the question of, it could have gone either way, right? It could have been that they accepted Bitcoin. It was a massive success, from their internal metrics, and as a result, they thought, well, let's add some others. Maybe that'll be a great success. Or maybe they did it. They added Bitcoin. It wasn't super popular, but they got a load of feedback saying, but what about the other cryptos? You know, like, we're interested in this, but just Bitcoin on its own is not going to get the job done, right? And so this is something that I often talk about on the show and point out, which is that is the big four of the heavy hitters, has been Bitcoin, and then Ethereum, BCH, and Litecoin as the next three that have been around the longest. They've proven that they're here to stay, and they're kind of in the mainstream, right? A lot of the other coins, which are maybe up and coming, or they have different angles or approaches, they haven't been around long enough for really big chains to kind of trust that they're not going away tomorrow, right? And in the case of AMC, it's also a strange case because they've recently been involved in the whole meme stocks thing with like GameStop skyrocketing and the short squeeze and everything. And then AMC are kind of in the same scenario where they have had their stock skyrocket, and a lot of people get involved and maybe turn around a struggling industry now that nobody really needs to go to the cinema if they can just stream movies online. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this? Tell us about AMC. Have you been to see a movie at an AMC theater?
I'm sure I have. I can't think of anything that like separated an AMC theater from any other theater that I've been to, but they're definitely a big deal in that sort of landscape. I do think it'll be interesting to see, you know, over the next few years, especially with COVID, that sort of led to some movie premieres that like premiered in a theater, but also on a streaming service. And so it'll be interesting to see if people will still, to a certain extent, gravitate towards theaters, because it is a like experience of having this big screen and surround sound and you know, all of that you don't
Getting
get.
The popcorn.
Right. And I think still to watch a movie that's premiered on a streaming service, it costs roughly the same as going to a theater, buying a ticket, things like that. So as long as there isn't that sort of price differential, I would think that there would still be some people thinking, okay, well, if I am going to spend the same amount of money either way, why don't I go ahead and go to a theater? But I do think overall, we're definitely seeing that theaters, well, even with AMC stocks, like, you know, it skyrocketed at that one point for a little while, but that was sort of an artificial sort of change in the market that wasn't necessarily due to any specific market features, and they are trending downward. So wouldn't surprise me if adding in some of these options for crypto helps them try to stay more relevant in this more digital landscape.
Yeah, get some more publicity and everything. And do you think that this kind of thing makes a big impact in corporate America? If AMC are doing this, do all the other cinema chains start to think to themselves, oh shit, you know, we need to be looking into this, we need to be ready to go with our, you know, our similar rollout? Or do you think they kind of think, look, AMC are finished, we've got them beat, like if this is their kind of desperation in quotes like play, then we can just write them off now? Like, do you have any speculation on that?
I don't think that anybody's panicked over it in that sort of sphere of like, oh, we got to start moving on this right away. But I do think that it would be a mistake from a business perspective to not at least go, oh, they're starting to accept this crypto, especially because they're doing some of the more popular ones. Maybe we should start thinking about that as well. I don't think that there's really a rush timeline there, but I do think that it's something that people will be sort of considering within the cinema landscape, especially since they are going to need to be looking for different ways to stay relevant now that the economy is a little more digital.
Yeah, and we'll wait and see, but I'm hoping and praying that AMC sits on it for 6 months and then releases some stats, because it would be so interesting to see what was the actual percentage of tickets that ended up being sold like this. Did it trend up or down over time? Maybe initially a lot of people were excited, but then they kind of forgot about it, or maybe it sort of slowly built up. And the distribution of coins too, now that they're going to have these 4 options, well, it will just be a bit of a market test of like, you know, which ones are consumers willing to invest in, and which ones are they willing to spend and use, you know, for commerce, right? So either, you know, any aspect of that could be super interesting. but I don't know if we are or we aren't going to get all the details. AMC won't want to be secretly sitting on that and having their execs buy up the coin that they know that everyone likes, right? They could be doing a bit of insider trading, and maybe other companies will need to accept crypto themselves to get that reliable data of what the market's thinking. I don't know. Could be interesting. We'll see. Obviously, my hope is that Bitcoin Cash just rockets ahead of all the others, and that the community, who are trying to live and spend on, crypto as their main source of currency. Hopefully, they can represent and show up to some of those theaters. If you want to go see new James Bond or whatever, go check that out and spend some Bitcoin Cash maybe, and rep the community. That would be pretty cool. All right, so every week, take a bit of a look at a community comment of the week. So this one comes from George Donnelly. He has been on the show actually before, so I'll put a link to his episode if you want to get a full breakdown. A lot of great thoughts by him. But he said this week, the little experimental hashtag Bitcoin Cash project you start today could dominate the globe in a decade. Think big and start now. And I just completely agree with this. Obviously, that's part of the reason that I started this podcast was kind of in the same mentality. But it could just be anything in the crypto industry. It's taking off and it's not really going anywhere. So you got to be in it for the long haul to survive all the volatility. But everyone listening to this show, I encourage you to be as involved as you can be, really, because I think it's the best thing for everyone, the best thing for the world. And I just replied here in the comments, anyone needing an idea, work backwards. When Bitcoin Cash is the world reserve currency, what projects and services would exist that don't today? Somebody will jump on each of those ideas between then and now, and that person could be you, right? So I think, there's not really a lack of ideas out there. But if you want to be involved and you're passionate about it, that's how I would think about it. Any thoughts on this one?
Not really. I agree with it. I think that if we're looking at, it's good to think backwards, right? If we're looking for Bitcoin Cash to be the global reserve currency at some point, we have a global reserve currency now. So start thinking about what's happening right now that we're going to need in that economy. It's really the best way to think about it.
Yeah, that's right. Or just the crypto industry generally, if you're not convinced on this one coin, you can pick another coin and make a currency that a service that works with every coin, right? People do tend to specialize into their favorite once they get to that level of kind of involvement, right? It's hard to be making a whole business in several different coins at once, unless you're doing a currency exchange type of business. But people can figure that out for themselves. All right, and then we've got meme of the week. So this one, we've got a surprise appearance from Nicki Minaj in the show. So she posted this week, my cousin in Trinidad won't get the vaccine because his friend got it and became impotent. His testicles became swollen. His friend was weeks away from getting married. Now the girl called off the wedding. So just pray on it and make sure you're comfortable with your decision, not bullied, right? So Nicki Minaj came out with this sort of COVID vaccine related information, and it set off a huge storm of opinions, right? From everyone saying like, well, Nicki Minaj is, spot on because they're skeptical of the vaccines and stuff like that, to people saying, look, this is ridiculous. Like, you can find a story of, somebody's cousin's friend's grandfather's, third mother-in-law or whatever, something happened there, but that's just the way of the world, on a sample size of 7 billion, like who knows whether, there's obviously no medical evidence. We're even just taking Nicki Minaj's word that this even happened, right? But I think, I think it did. I don't think she's lying about it, but you could easily make the case that it was, it was just a joke or whatever. So subsequently, there was a lot of fallout with everybody arguing and stuff about it. And then somebody made this meme, which I quite liked. It's a little 4-panel comic of this guy doing tug of war, and he's pulling, and he's got the snake. I don't even know what this
it's
snake
the don't tread on me snake.
The don't tread on me snake. Is there another name for it though? Is it just the...
I don't know if it has another name. I just know that there's like a house near mine that flies a flag that says "Don't tread on me" with that snake.
Yeah, Jett's gonna get in here with the info.
There
Jett,
we go.
let's hear it. What's this snake about?
I'm nearly certain it starts with a G. Give me 1 second to look this up.
Cool.
Gary the snake.
Gary.
But it's this anyway. All I know about it is this snake that is heavily associated with this kind of like libertarian or ANCAP type of philosophy of sort of like gun ownership and that kind of thing, right? Which is like you should be armed in defense. I can't read that, man. You're gonna have to read that.
The Gadsden flag.
The Gadsden flag.
It's a timber rattlesnake, coiled and ready to strike.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, there you go.
Created
so
in
that
1775.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So
American Revolution.
Okay. Well, there you go. So it does tie right back to those early sort of principles and of liberty and self-defense, self-sufficiency, those kind of things, right? So the meme is this guy's doing pulling the tug of war, and then the second panel is he's pulling the tug of war, and then next to him is Nicki Minaj is pulling, and then the third panel is on the other end. It's a guy with the communism shirt and sort of a fat cat banker type of guy that they're pulling against, and then the fourth panel is it just cuts back to the guy with the Gadsden timber rattlesnake on his shirt, and he just says, "Huh?" As it's just like he's been so focused on pulling that he's just suddenly surprised to find that Nicki Minaj is actually on his side, which he was not expecting before, right? And this just made me laugh because not only did it kind of show the point that anybody can be on the side of cryptocurrency or freedom really in general, like it's not some exclusive club, and just because people are not making a big racket out of it doesn't mean they aren't generally, predisposed to those ideas or in favor of them. There's a big sort of silent contingent of people that like all those ideas that are not necessarily, evangelizing it every single day. But also that, you never know who, especially like celebrities, with big clout that already have a lot of voice, if they speak up. I mean, they can't do it all the time because, they don't want to become known for just trying to dabble around in politics rather than whatever their core expertise is. But every once in a while we see on all kinds of issues celebrities just get in the mix and suddenly just shift the conversation because they already have such, Nicki Minaj has like 22 million Twitter followers or something like that. So especially something like this that she posts and goes viral, it's, the global impact of those ideas is absolutely massive. So yeah, what do you think of this? You a big Nicki Minaj fan?
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a particular Nicki Minaj fan, but I'm certainly aware of her and aware of her music. I think I'm glad that she didn't go the route of sort of anti-vaccination with it. I think she probably knows, again, having 22 million followers, that what she says has a really big impact. And I think across the board, science is generally telling us that this is a safe vaccine and we need to listen to the scientists, but it's not to say that there aren't going to be some of these one-off cases. It's a new vaccine. We don't know all of the, possible side effects of it. People with underlying conditions that maybe they didn't know that they had that are having a reaction to this sort of thing. There's certainly it's okay to be skeptical. But again, as she says, like, make sure you're comfortable with the decision that you're making. Don't let people bully you into it. But also know that for almost across the board, scientists are telling us that this is a safe vaccine and that the majority of people can get it and not have these long-lasting side effects. So
yeah, and that was an interesting part of the sort of discussion, was that there's sort of there's two kind of separate conversations where one is about the merits or not, pro or against, and then the other side is just the sort of meta discussion of like being allowed to be on one side or the other, right? With that, and that's kind of what she was commenting on there, right? And she did follow up in the rest of these tweets. People can follow the link on the slide and read it if they're interested. But she made a point in her later comments that she was definitely not saying one way or the other, how people should decide, simply that people should be able to decide without being pressured or without feeling, ostracized or bullied in her words of it. So
it's a decision you need to make with your doctor. It's sort of, the government needing to sort of stay out of people's medical decisions. It's something you need to sit down. You have a discussion with your doctor about it. You shouldn't be pressuring people to either take the vaccine or not take the vaccine. It's a medical decision that we all need to make, and make it as intelligently as we can. So.
Yeah, and to tie it back to crypto, that's exactly what you're saying. It's an individual kind of decision, and that was the whole joke of the meme, right? Is that when we talked a lot about regulation and the government getting involved, and it's sort of like ultimately people should just read up, do their research, get educated, and then kind of decide for themselves. So I'm sure Nicki is back in that opinion, and so am I. So everybody can we'll see who will be the next celebrity to be suddenly on the side of freedom and individual choice. Right, so that's as we come to the end of the show, we just have every week message to the community. The guest gets a chance to talk to the Bitcoin Cash community at large, or the world, or whatever you think people need to hear. It's open slather. What do you think?
I think if you're kind of like me, you're not super into all the crypto stuff, you're kind of new to the game and you're still learning about everything. Like, I just want to encourage you to continue looking into some of that stuff. I definitely personally think that this is the way that things are going to be trending in the future, that getting involved now is only going to benefit me down the road or benefit other people down the road. So certainly just continue researching, continue listening to the podcast, continue,
I love it.
Continue just sort of exploring, going down that road, looking into different cryptocurrencies, find the one that you really believe in, and get involved, continue doing stuff. It's okay to not be a total expert. Like, not all of us are going to be experts. Just look into it and learn. So
yeah, absolutely. I gotta second that, and I find that's something I've been thinking about, sort of ways that I can make some more content or some different things that are more at that sort of beginner level. Because when I started this show, it was kind of for the hardcore, especially the first few episodes. It is very just like straight to the point. Like, it didn't start with, and I mean, it's just the format of a podcast too. You can't have every episode be a complete, reintroduction to the rules of the road, so to speak, right? But it is a show more that people can either follow casually or very seriously, and it's most interesting to people who want to follow it kind of week to week. So I am trying to think of ways to help us get the most critical pieces of information, to highlight them somehow, or have, so that people who are new to it don't feel completely overwhelmed, because it is sort of rushing forward at a grand pace, the whole industry, and there's just sort of a messy scenario of people getting involved with all kinds of scattered information. But at some point, they've kind of got to look into it themselves, and there are resources out there, right? I've got a bunch of them listed on the website for people to look at, but I might try and make something myself. We'll see. I don't know. I'm pretty busy, got a lot going on. But that essentially does it for the show then. Slides and resources are at bitcoincashpodcast.com. Thank you very much to all of my donators who send in BCH to the show. Appreciate it a lot. It's amazing. You can follow the show on YouTube, on Noise.cash, on Twitter, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all of that. Do you have any final shout outs for the show, Caroline?
Not really. You already gave me the opportunity to give my little message across. We're good.
Yeah, okay. All right, cool. That's pretty short and efficient then. Yeah. Jett, how are we doing there? Looking good to wrap up the show. Any final thoughts?
There's a lot of things that I feel like just to feed your curiosity, maybe interesting things that I have noticed this week. The creators of Twitch have been talking mad shit on Craig Wright, and there's a lot of people that are like disillusioned, it seems like, by BSV. eCash now has more hash rate than BSV, which is so wild to me. Like, to think like 2 years ago Craig was like, you split, we bankrupt you, and now like, yeah. And Litecoin also flipped Bitcoin Cash with BitPay statistics the past month.
Yes.
And like, the spike that Litecoin has experienced is something that I wouldn't ever expect. So I'm curious about why. Yeah, I think that's the big things for me this week.
Wow. Okay, that's a little sub story that I hadn't been following too much, but obviously the cutthroat free market of crypto is still at it, and BSV, they've definitely had a long time to sort of establish an identity and pull their act together, but they haven't really done that as far as I can tell. I'm not a big fan of what they got going on, and if eCash, is coming out with some fresh momentum and can get a bit of a lead ahead of them, well, that's going to just push them even further into kind of irrelevance, I would say. But yeah, Litecoin has been seeing a spike up definitely from people who like the idea of using an actual regulated currency, but for one reason or another, maybe they had Bitcoin and then they think, oh, well, I'll go into Litecoin instead of going into Bitcoin Cash. So it seems like every different currency has really got to up its game to stand out in the free market these days. So yeah, maybe we'll follow that up. I'll look into that. We'll see about the next episode, maybe. But that will do it for the show. Thanks everyone for listening, and until next time. Future dollars can buy nothing for you. You've heard of inflation, right? Banks fucked you